Welcome, everybody, to the final live event with live panelists for our two-day Cultureword National Black Writers Conference. And just to say who I am, my name is Cheryl Martin, and I'm the co-chair of Common Word Cultureword. And I am a middle-aged Black lady with medium brown skin, and right now a sort of fro-sized head of curls, a couple of dangly multicolored earrings, a very light pink round necked sweater, and I'm sitting in front of a dark green, what looks like a dark green couch with a little bit of an emerging Ghanaian artist painting behind me, and some pink and white flowers on one side with a blue and white vase, and a tiny bit, I think you can see, of a Frida Kahlo head, which is a plant. And this particular event is called Unlock the Story. And it's an experiment that we wanted to try at Cultureword after it was actually suggested by Chi, who's one of our readers today, that we're going to let you hear the beginning of two wonderful stories, and then you can go and donate a bit of money to unlock the second half of the story. And that's the whole experiment, to see how this works. And so just to introduce our two readers, our two authors today, we have Abe Abdul, is a Yoruba Nigerian writer who won various poetry awards throughout her childhood. Fascinated by how grammar could be bent to facilitate new meaning and enhance creative expression, she's worked for several years in higher education as an English language lecturer and assessor across the globe. She still enjoys composing poetry, focusing as ever on social justice and topics celebrating our common humanity, which have been included in various anthologies. But most of her expressive writing is now creative nonfiction prose and autoethnographical memoir in particular, encompassing her schooling across 3 continents in Nigeria, the UK, and Japan. It's a colorful blend of narratives and sociology of young Black kids navigating a Scottish world, of warm, embracing diversity and cold, unsettling racism, and thus a universal story told in a unique context. Her upcoming project, entitled Yoruba Yonder, focuses on diasporic stories of global travels and worldly perspectives. That is packing quite a punch. We have been so lucky with the people who've joined us this weekend to be part of our conference. And not least is Chi Ndubisi, and I apologize for mangling your name. I should have asked before I came online. Ensemble associate for Manchester's Quarantine Theatre Company, recently worked with local sound artist Jadev Mystery on audio walk The People Of along Northmore Road in Manchester's Longside neighborhood. Also a striking visual artist, which I can attest. She exhibited with local painter Krishna Sari last summer in a pop-up gallery at Salford's Islington Mill. And that, tantalizing little bit of a painting you can see behind me is actually by Krishna Sari. So, and now, without more ado, on to the lovely readings. And we're gonna start with Chi.
Hello, everyone. My name is Chi Ndubisi. I am a Black lady, round-faced. I have a short afro. I've got large gold earrings that are the shape of leaves. I'm wearing a white dress and a fluffy orange cardigan. And I'm sitting in the corner of a room. There's a door to my right-hand side, and behind me is a very small print of the human chromosomes illustrated by socks. I'm going to be reading today part of a 3-part story. The first part is called Breath Held, the second is Oral Pearl, and the last is The Scribe. So I'll read the first half, and this is actually part of a larger novel that's a bit of a choose your own story. So you can choose the chapters depending on what you want out of the story, out of the novel. So if you want something that's got a happy ending, you pick certain chapters. If you want something that's a bit epic, you choose certain chapters. If you want a romance, you choose other chapters. So this sort of sits as part of a whole. So I'll read for you the first part. It's called Breath Held. Number 1. She pushed a soul against a wall of flesh, and the aperture grew. She became mother and was buried with her new title, buried by it. She squatted over the depression in the earth and bled. The doula had moments before reached into her and pulled out of her the child. As an immortal entity, part of something fierce and uncompromising, she had permitted the small, old, arthritic fingers of a god to rip and tear her. She had found the strength to allow her flesh to be broken, but her mortal body was not built for cosmic action, and she bled and bled and bled. This sized tissue episodically fell from her bloodied hole into the shallow throated receptacle. What the offering lacked in form, it compensated in volume. Torrents of blood, tissue, and water issued from her. As they fought to revive the fat infant, she grew pale. The light ebbed from her skin and the color from her eyes. Ju, mother, sank oddly onto her knees under the weight of her crown. The earth drank its offering, grew rich and dark and swollen with her blood. Her hand sank into it, and her face met it with a thick slap. The lungs of her daughter forced itself open as Ju's chest collapsed. The child was permitted to be and cried. The attendants held their ward. The doula pulled the naked and spent body of Ju from her knees, and the wizened midwife took the child to her dead mother. The fist of 4 women, still surrounded by the chorus of 9, stayed silent. Of that 9, 3 joined the silence. 3 wept for the crying infant, and 3 wailed for the mother. The village knew then that Ju had passed, that her child lived, and the joy and grief cancelled each other out in the tones and rhythm of the chorus, in the silence that engulfed the coven of women. 2. Some women did not make the journey. It was expected at every birth that at least one or both might be lost, but it was an honor to attempt it. The loss of Ju was not expected. She was one of 12 from the same womb. Her mother and her mother's mother were one of many. They delivered their progeny with little event. Labor had started early, but the attendants were ready. In the chamber specially built for the delivery of infant tribespeople, the 9 witnesses stood at the periphery, painted head to toe in ash black. Their song was a careful orchestra of hums, throat breaths, and clucked tongues. They'd held a melody, fists thumped on the large resonant chests. They kept time, kept pace with Ju, moved in breath and beat with her. They mirrored the waves of contractions that came more frequently. They narrated and accompanied her as she struggled to push the child out. The midwife had heard their song and knew that something was wrong. She came with a knife and freshly washed hands. Labor had started early. It beat the light from the east by several stretches. They had been ready. The water was boiled, the vegetables that would accompany the afterbirth prepared. The chorus were assembled and waiting. The midwife informed of what was to come. In the cool early morning, elders had been woken or interrupted by the news of an imminent member. They gave their blessing, sent words of encouragement, gifts to accompany the mother in her journey. She was washed with them, her newly shaved head dressed by them. The infant was now in her limp arms. Her skin was cold, now scented with the metallic base note of blood and sweat. Her dress of indigo and gold hung from her slumped shoulders, its hem thick with ochre red earth. Even though labor had started early, Manu was prepared. Her child was fed, warm and watered, tied to her back. He slept the sleep of the innocent. It left Manu free to wash, anoint, and dress her cousin. She delighted in entering the birth chamber alongside her sister cousin, both to welcome their kith and kin. Now, Ju's hands were in hers. They held their daughter together. The chorus wept with shuddering sighs. There were no words. They cried the shrill klaxon of the infant. There were no words. And in the death mask, in numb grief, in stoic acceptance, there were no words. The boy at Mari's back woke, baby Luca, silent with curiosity. The first of the tribespeople to look at the baby in the arms of her dead mother without grief. He was the first to know her name before the others would. Rain, because it did. 3. The child could not be named, could not be initiated without her mother's until her mother could participate. So once again, Ju, the new mother, was split open, washed, dressed, and anointed. She was washed in the river. In repose, she looked her 19 years. Her cheeks and chest full. Her naked body was red, the story of her short life sung. She was rubbed with palm oil. It gave her an ethereal cherry wood glow. They weaved herbs, flowers, bark, the sweet smelling into her, and placed offerings of fruit where her limbs met her body. Yams nestled with her cleaned liver, sweet potatoes in her bowels. In the morning of the 4th day, when the body was ready, bound in root and wrapped in reed linen, banana leaves were placed into the warm hearth of her grave. They poured coconut water after her, the rising steam sweet in the air. She was lifted out and wrapped and consumed on the evening of the 5th day. Her flesh broke the mourner's fast, the tribe taking into their corpus the body of their child so that she may live forever. Rain was given her name on the 6th day. Led by Luca's mother, her cheeks grew heavy. Rain, blessed thrice by the gift of the sky, the gift of a mother's milk, the blood spilt freely for the beloved. Water, milk, and blood. What better baptism could be offered? The end of part 1.
Wow. Thank you so much. I mean, taking us, that is what you call world building, folks, taking us to another world, another, a culture that's, you know, got its customs and its whole sort of life and, you know, the nature of it and the feel of it all created. Excellent work. Thank you so much, Chi. And just to say, I didn't say earlier that she had also entered our Going Digital competition looking for compelling new digital forms. And she was one of the 3 winners. So, you know, check out our, she's on Instagram. And if you look at our Twitter feed, and I guess our Instagram feed, you'll be able to see her story there, which was as beautiful as the one you just heard. So again, folks, they're going to, loads and loads of love pouring in there. And if you want to hear the next part of that story, I'm hoping that they will soon, well, before the end of this session, you'll be able to hear the second part of Chi's story right away. And to unlock the story, you just need to donate something, whatever you want, and you'll be given a key that will take you to where you can hear, and I think see, the second part of Chi's story, which I know you must want to know because I do. Oh, it's there to donate and unlock. Melanie, just drop that into the chat. So to donate and unlock the next part of the story, you can sign up for your key here and they give you an Eventbrite. So do that right away. I know I want to hear what happens next. Okay, so thank you, Chi, for getting, and if I didn't say already, this was Chi's idea. this whole, it was like we were having just a random discussion one day. And she said, what if, I was saying, I want to see more ways of supporting writers. And she was like, well, what if you tried exactly what we're doing today? So thank you for that idea as well. And now we move on to our second reader, our second author, Abe Abdul. And I will now get out of the way so that you can tell your story, Abe.
Thank you, Sharon. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to Unlock the Story. How I look today is chestnut brown skin and black afro hair in 3 twists. I'm wearing silver dangly earrings and a Nigerian Ankara blouse and skirt with a purple, pink, and brown lined design. So I'm going to be reading a combination of extracts from chapters 1, 2, and 3 of my upcoming memoir series called Stained Glass Eyes, focusing on Nigerian and Angolan Spanish childhoods in Scotland, steeped in race, multiculturalism, and in this case, misdirection. Chapter 1 is called Good Times. Esperanza Moreno and I had been friends for ages, and I thought her natural sunshine would never waver, certainly not, as it turned out, because of me. As the train pulled into Edinburgh Waverley Station, it was surreal stepping out into Princes Street and taking in a panoramic view of the time-worn, dusty brown buildings that made up the city centre. The year was 2012, and I hadn't visited in almost 2 decades. Looking around, it seemed to have been locked in a time capsule, unchanged in any discernible way. Then my head tilted up towards the downcast sky, and I was happy for the new set of braids on my scalp to offset any of the region's typical rainfall, the bane of natural Afro hair. There was hardly time to get my bearings when my jeans pocket started vibrating. Reaching for my phone, I saw Esperanza's name on the display, which after answering was soon followed by her familiar Spanish, "Hola." After following her directions around the side of the station, a car horn sounded behind me. I turned round, and rather than the 2D photos she'd sent me over the years, I was seeing the real 3D Esperanza for the first time in almost a decade, igniting a spontaneous run forward. She got out of the car to reciprocate my big squeezy hug before we stepped back smiling, now in our 30s, but looking no different from our uni days in Brighton, save a sparse sprinkling of gray hairs each. From Waverley Station, we drove off through Edinburgh, surveying the urban sprawl, as I remembered some of the photos Esperanza had sent of family trips with her Angolan husband, Joa Quilombo, and their 2 kids, Zinga and Laito, around the city's historical landmarks. This included the Old Town, containing the Royal Mile leading up to Edinburgh Castle. I'd always felt its massive, weathered structure embodied the darkness envisioned in Macbeth, and could easily imagine each aspect of Shakespeare's sinister play taking place there. Equally enthralling was the intriguing ancientness of Blackness Castle, built in the shape of a ship, as well as the striking modernity of the Scottish Parliament building with its quirky Art Nouveau design, curved and angular at the same time. But all that paled to the quirky poses that the Moreno Colombo kids and parents alike struck in front of the many sites with arms and legs out in every direction and faces animated to the max, which always had me chuckling. My previous visits to Edinburgh had never seen me venture far from the city centre. It was therefore interesting to see that this new area called Morningside had the same dark, dusty brown buildings of Princes Street. In fact, Esperanza pulled up right in front of one and exclaimed, "We're home." Grabbing my travel bag, I said, "So this is your close," remembering the Scottish slang term for a block of flats. After climbing the stairs, my momentary wheezing was soon drowned out by squealing as Zinga and Lito came running to the door to greet their mother before taking a good look at her visitor. I gave them my Colombian souvenirs from my most recent assignment abroad in South America, and their big toothy grins signaled I definitely scored points there. Once I dumped my luggage, we went to the kitchen, where we found Joa sitting at the dining table. As ever, he had his trademark purse smile, same as I remembered him, a poised but still warm contrast to Esperanza's standard wide beamer. As we hugged, a double wave of nostalgia engulfed me, seeing the people from my university days in England within the settings of my school days in Scotland. I soon understood the kitchen was the epicenter of the home, as there was a lot of commotion, with everyone coming in and out, bringing in books, toys, TV guides, and more. Esperanza wanted to start cooking lunch, and the kids were excited to help, but she then realized she'd forgotten to pick up some salad items for the meal that day. So we headed back downstairs into the car with the kids in tow. Upon arriving at the local supermarket, we saw an interesting looking pack of green leaves with red stems called chard. None of us had tried it before, so fitting our norm of trying something new, we threw a bunch into our trolley. Esperanza then began sounding off various other things they needed around the house. What happened next was a very well-rehearsed set of army maneuvers, with the kids as mini lieutenants and their mother, the general, giving them instructions of things to bring back to her. With each call out of baked beans, morning rolls, etc., Zinga and Lito scurried out of sight to fetch their targets before reappearing a few minutes later and relinquishing them to the trolley. This family was clearly a fine-tuned, well-oiled machine, and I was loving every minute of seeing their familiar bond in action. I said as much to Esperanza, "Life here must be so much fun," though my broad smile was conversely met with her furrowed brow as she said, "Abby, this place isn't all fun." Her face became as downcast as the skies, the expression and coloration contrasting with her normally rosy cheeks. The kids were still on their current escapade, and I was intrigued by her statement. I remembered the exasperation in her voice when I'd called from Colombia a few days prior, and thinking this might be linked to it, I asked her to go on. She told me the joy of moving to Morningside had started to unravel rather quickly. Recounting their very first month in Edinburgh, she said the kids had already begun noticing the lack of friendliness towards them from the surrounding community, and it soon became obvious it was because of their skin color. At first, the sentiment was only subtly displayed, with some initial signs during a trip to that same local supermarket, and some people not returning the children's smile, avoiding eye contact, or turning their back towards them. Then one day, as Esperanza shopped amongst the various aisles, Zinga unusually came back without her target item. She told her mother she'd seen Robin, a schoolmate who was also out shopping with her mum. Zinga went over to say hi, but it seemed Robin's mum didn't want Zinga to be near her daughter, turning her in the other direction and walking off. Thinking that was odd, but no big thing, Esperanza continued with the shopping. Though a few minutes later, Lito unexpectedly returned to say he had also seen a girl in his class shopping with her grandmother. Being his outgoing self, Lito too had gone up to say hi. but his approach prompted the girl's grandmother to shout, "Get off!" This senior citizen's abrasive behavior perplexed the very friendly 5-year-old and took Esperanza aback. Still, the Moreno Columbus shrugged them off, deciding not to dwell on odd behavior, and concluded their shopping trip relatively unfazed. Though that was to change when more wanton hostility beyond the supermarket was soon noticeable at school itself. One day, Lito joined in an after-school spinning game in the playground, which involved all the kids twirling around until so dizzy they fell all over each other. But when one girl fell down beside Lito, Esperanza noted the other parents' unsmiling faces glaring at him with impatience. It had been quite unsettling to see the hostile energy specifically directed towards her child, who was, after all, just doing the same thing as his classmates. Around the same time, Esperanza began noticing Zinga was coming home unhappy. Their family routine was always to eat together, discussing the day's events around the dining table, at which the normally sunny, engaging little girl was unusually subdued. Afterwards, Esperanza would ask her what was the matter, but received no definitive answers. She therefore sent emails to the school several times inquiring what was happening, but never got a single reply. Exasperated by the wall of silence, she again asked Zinga what was wrong. Her persistence finally paid off when her daughter revealed she was being harassed with hostility beyond that which had been directed at Lito after that after-school spinning game. The other pupils' reaction to their new schoolmates wasn't one of curiosity about their Angolan Spanish background. Instead, they showed the same hostility that their parents and guardians had displayed towards the mixed-race siblings. Though the brunt of the abuse soon focused on Zinga, who had girls and boys alike coming up to her every day shouting, "You are so ugly! Your afro is so ugly! You look like bullshit!" Racism. Racism. Such a simple 6-letter, 3-syllable word. Yet time had exposed many levels of definition for this particular prejudice. The first was quite self-explanatory. Racism is the belief that innate physical variations across different human races determine cultural or individual ability, which then assign either superior or inferior status to certain races over others. As the supermarket's ceiling vents emitted warm air currents descending over my hair, my eyes, my nose, my lips, and my skin, I thought how odd it was for the color, texture, or shape of these attributes to be problematic for such people. Then there was the broader definition of racism as a policy or a social system inherently characterized by racial discrimination, which, unlike the air currents rolling off my back, had broken the backs of so many life prospects across the world. Why? Because the ultimate essence of racism is infused with the feeling of hatred or aversion towards one or many racial groups, as Zinga had unfairly experienced in the school playground that day. With that thought, I felt my skin crawl, as if that concept was a lingering impurity that the heated gusts from the ceiling vents could not blow away. Such attacking words shook this little girl deeply, resulting in the change Esperanza had seen in her daughter at the dining table and beyond. Now they knew about the name calling, Esperanza and Joa reported it to Mrs. Doris Jefferson, the school's acting head teacher. She had been temporarily put in charge a month after the Moreno Colombo kids were enrolled, But from the very beginning, this woman's attitude towards the racist bullying struck these concerned parents as totally blasé. On the first occasion they met with Doris Jefferson, she had taken notes and reassuringly said that she would speak to the involved parties. But it soon became clear that she didn't follow up with student interviews or anything to that effect, leaving the matter unresolved and Esperanza and Joa feeling angsty. Later, during a parents' meeting, they again spoke to Doris Jefferson, inquiring how she was handling the behavior towards their daughter. She gave them a vague answer, which it seemed was intended to placate them, because again, they saw no action taken against the bullies in the wake of that second conversation. Back in the supermarket, Esperanza continued her story, saying how the Edinburgh head teacher's attitude was in stark contrast to the head teacher at Zinga's previous school in Newcastle. A similar racist incident had occurred when the Moreno Colombo kids first enrolled there, and two white kids approached the 3-year-old Zinga at that time in the toilet and jeered, "What color is your tongue? What color is your wee? Is that black as well?" Before laughing in her face, Zinga was left in tears and was still quite distraught when later recounting the incident to her mother. At such a young age, this little girl had no concept of race and couldn't work out why they were saying such horrible things. Where was their viciousness coming from, considering it was completely without provocation on her part? At that time, Esperanza saw something else shift in her daughter's eyes, which was this mother's understanding to be the change from innocence. On that occasion, the parents also immediately reported the incident to the school, and the Newcastle head teacher met with the two bullies. She got them to admit to their actions, then sent a letter to both girls' parents, as well as the local board of education, stating that if they conducted themselves that way towards Zinga again, they would be expelled. Such a swift and professional response from the school leadership was nowhere to be seen at the Edinburgh school, which left Esperanza reeling. She and Joa had chosen that school thinking it would be in keeping with their Christian tradition. But below the surface, it began to appear very different from the moral, compassionate, and indeed professional haven they'd expected. Dear Lord. Hearing all of this in the supermarket aisle with our chads and other groceries totally threw me for a loop. But by that time, our trolley was full, and Zinga and Lito were permanently at our side. So Esperanza forcibly lifted a downcast expression from her face to be sunny for the kids, as did I. We headed over to the checkout tills, paid for our food, and drove back home. I'd certainly been looking forward to the meal, but Esperanza's story of the kids' experiences had put a lump in my throat, making me wonder if I'll be able to swallow anything at all. Back at the close, we carried the shopping bags up the stairs, into the flat, and straight to the kitchen, where the kids started putting away the groceries as efficiently as they had collected them at the supermarket. Esperanza then whipped up a lovely meal, prepared the chard salads to accompany our lunch, and we all sat down to indulge. We chatted away about Colombia and my latest travels, which the kids were fascinated by, listing off amazing random locales across the world as far as their young imaginations could stretch, and their eyes widening to hear that I'd indeed been to all of their guesses. Dubai? Yes. Thailand? Yes. Shanghai? Yes. South Korea? Yes. Whoa! But what I really wanted was to hear more stories from this locale. Edinburgh Morningside, and what else had happened to the kids within their school community. I was to get my chance after the meal when Joa headed out to run a few errands, and the kids went off to watch some telly. As Esperanza and I cleared the table and washed the dishes, she shared more of what had happened at the school. So many times the kids came home upset, Esperanza said, as we sat together at the table once the dishes were done. The constant animosity coming Zinga and Leiter's way at school continued to affect their confidence, and the declining self-esteem was further compounded by emotional blockages in Zinga. This in turn affected not only her academic learning, but her perceived life prospects. Like so many little girls, she loved ballet dancing, captured by the flowing tippy-toe movements and elegance. During one TV performance, she said she wanted to possibly become a ballerina, but quickly followed this with, "But brown people can't be ballet dancers." The anguish in Esperanza's voice was clear as she said, "Heading my 8-year-old daughter, already believing her ethnicity was a barrier to reaching her dreams, was the most unfair disruption of the love and nurturing that I wanted to envelop my children in, to build their inner strength." All I could do was nod in agreement to this mother's distressed words about the consequence of the negativity being impressed upon her child. But there was still worse to come. With time, Zinga started transferring the racism outside her home into her family circle. One day, she came into the living room, sat down next to Esperanza, looked her in the eye, and calmly asked, "Mummy, would you love me more if I were white?" And I'll end the story there for now. Thank you for listening to part 1 of the narrative.
Goodness, what a terrible, it's a wonderful and terrible line to end on. You know, would you love me more if I were white? Just devastating little portrait of what it was like for that family up in Edinburgh, which is shocking, 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 considering this is the here and now and not 60 or 40 years ago. So much for all the people who think racism is past tense in the UK. We had a little chance to ask a few questions of Chi earlier. Before you go on to the unlocking, if you could drop that into the chat again, Mel, just to remind everybody of how to do it. Does anybody have any questions for Abe or for Chi? Even though we're running a little bit late, we've got time for a couple of questions maybe. So far, it's just, yeah, thanks for everybody's patience with the Zoom world. This is the only time we got zapped. You know, it would be the last time we've got live readers in the room. Melanie's dropped how to unlock that. I know you must want to hear more from both of those, from the fascinating world that she is creating and from the fascinating portrait of our own world that Abe is creating. And so far, we're not getting questions. I think that for this session, people are much more focused on finding out what's going to happen next. If I'll just give one more. Oh, lots of claps. We're saving the chat. And I know that you've been working, so you haven't had a chance to look at all the love you're getting from people in the chat who absolutely love it. A question: have you found the writing of your words an education to others? I'll start with Abe first for that one.
Every time that anyone has listened to my experience with Esperanza and basically even read drafts of my memoir, they have been very shocked. Shocked not just because of the behavior, but exactly like you said, Cheryl, they just don't believe it's happening. They think this is something from centuries ago, or the 1950s, the 1970s. No, it's 2021. Oh, in that case, it was 2012 when it was happening. And it really did provoke me to investigate further exactly what the state of affairs was in Scotland specifically. And indeed, 2021, 2020, the exact same thing is still happening. I keep on hearing stories from people who I interview on this very topic, on racism. And I even started producing research articles. There's a whole website dedicated to this called the Scottish Racism Project, which I started. And it's very much a contemporary thing, unfortunately. Yes. So the answer to that is yes, people, they are getting educated more and more, and hopefully therefore turning the energy of the shock into an energy of action to definitively do something about it.
Well, thank you, Abe. We have another question. Does your writing or your stories, do they ever trigger your own trauma around race and racism? And if so, how do you manage this? Again, I think that might be a little bit more for Abe.
Yes, is the short answer. The longer answer is in the memoir itself, I would say. I mean, in order to write a memoir, or to be motivated to write a memoir like this, I would say I was very triggered when Esperanza was telling me as we're sitting at the dining table when I was visiting her family in Edinburgh. I was just taken aback by the extent of overlap between the stories she was saying her children were experiencing, and indeed what I experienced at a similar age whilst at school in Scotland. Yes, so it certainly is triggering, and I guess the way to handle it is by writing a memoir about it, sharing stories about it, letting people know more and more what the reality is, because it's only when we let people know can something be done about it, and that in itself will be part of the healing process. Seeing changes being made, hopefully for the better, so this isn't happening generation after generation after generation.
Well, thank you very much. Someone mentions there's an ongoing myth about racism happening more in England than Scotland. And actually, I lived in Scotland for a year, and I can say it was much worse up there than in Manchester anyway. There is another question. How did the stories resonate with your own experiences growing up? I think I'll send that one to you first, Chi, because you're writing about a child as well. So how does that resonate with your own experiences growing up?
So I often find it very difficult to speak directly to an experience or to memorialize my experience. It's as I said, it's often easier to transplant that experience or transplant that experience to another character or another world, and then unpack it within that. So a lot of the stories that I write are about things that have happened or things I've witnessed happen. And by sort of putting it into another body or putting it into another world, I can then truly inhabit how violent it is or how devastating it is. I can really sort of, I can lean into that experience by doing so. So, and the story of Rain is although yes, there are, it is a different world, and I have not eaten anybody. I have no desire to, and I have not been in a culture that does so. But what I am doing and what I've done with that world is to examine what it is to build a ritual. And so I'm Nigerian diasporan. I came here when I was very young, and I have all the complex experiences that brings. And there is a degree of a loss of what feels like should belong to me, and sort of trying to understand how to reclaim some of that, but also what it means to have a culture, and what it means to build a new one, and what it means to sort of inhabit one that, or sort of take from the culture that I've been transplanted into, and try how to make that your own. So sort of exploring those ideas of what it is to build a community, and what it is to belong in one, and what the costs are and what the benefits are. And I can do that by building another one, and by then really examining those components in a completely fantastical way, in a way that does not directly relate to my own experiences. So yeah, that's what I can say about that.
Well, thank you for that. And Abe, I'm afraid that probably will be the last question, because we're running over, and there's another event supposedly going to start in 5 minutes, but which will probably be a little bit late if anyone was planning to go to that one. But could you answer the same question sort of briefly about whether this resonates with your own childhood experiences?
The story which
you're reading,
I shared today. In many ways it did, surprisingly so. You know, I guess I thought after so many years, you know, decades had passed since I'd gone to school in Scotland, that things had changed. Things have not changed. Things have just continued to be the same. And, you know, people trying to put a nice happy face on it, you know, make sure it's brushed on the carpet and goes on behind the scenes, which is why a memoir like this is very important, to bring it to the forefront, and to make sure childhoods like Singa and Lightos are not blighted by the exact same thing time and time again.
Well, thank you. Let's hope that's a hope that we can all join in with. And the poll, thank you first to Abe and to Chi for taking part in our little experiment. Thank you to all of you out there in the audience who come from all over, really from all over. And I hope that you now go and sign up and unlock the second part of these stories. Chi's is available now, and Abe's will follow later in the week. And you might see on your screen, there's a poll that's popped up. Thank you to our funders, mostly the Arts Council, as well as National Heritage Lottery Fund, Esme Fairbairn, British Council, and to get more money from our funders, because we're a Black-led national portfolio organization of the Arts Council, we need to account to the Arts Council for how we spend their money and how we're reaching audiences. So if you could just answer those 3 little questions, it would really help us with our evaluation. And so I'm going to just say thank you once more for the lovely reading. And thank you to the audience for staying with our technical glitches, and all of you actually hanging in there. And thanks to both of you for being brave and taking part in this experiment, and being our last 2 live authors for 2 days. It has been a wonderful conference. I should have said that the theme of the conference this year was "We Want to Dream." And that's riffing on Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" from over 60 years ago. But it's also because talking to a lot of Black artists, we realized that people don't want to be stuck into pigeonholes that are made by other people, stereotyped, pinned in, being somebody else's tick box exercise. And instead, we wanted to give people freedom to do, write, create, whatever they want. And it's made for a brilliant weekend, as you just heard from these 2 authors. So, and again, congratulations to Chi for being one of the winners of our Going Digital competition. And we're looking forward to seeing the story of Rain in whatever form it finally takes. And for you've got Abe's memoir, sociological, ethnographical memoir coming up as well, works in progress. Thank you very much for joining us. And I'm going to say goodbye now, because we've got to do the next event.
And thank you as well, Cheryl. You've been a wonderful host all throughout the conference and for this event as well.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.